Hello, viewers and learners. You are warmly welcome to Joy Learning Classroom. I am Emmanuel, your facilitator for mathematics lesson. Today, we are going to talk about mathematics lesson in Basic 4. You can as well follow us on our YouTube channel at Joy Learning TV. Joy Learning TV. Good. So today, we are going to talk about mathematics, and our topic for today, or our strand for today, is numbers and numerals. Numbers and numerals. But before we begin our lesson, let us take a quick starter. Now, we all know, or up to basic 4, I believe you can count from 1 up to 50. You can count from 1 up to 50. But today, let us try and rather count backwards. We are counting backwards. So we are going to count from 50 up to 0, backwards. We are counting backwards. So let us start. Right from 50 backwards up to 0. So let us start. 50, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39, 38, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Now, what did you take into consideration, or what did you take? You saw that when I was counting, I jumped a little. You must take note in whatever you do when you are counting backwards. In our next lessons, we'll also be doing all those things. We'll be counting, sometimes we'll be counting in 2s, we'll be counting in 5s, we'll be counting in 10s as well. Viewers, let us begin our lesson under numbers and numerals. Numbers and numerals. So for today, we are going to talk about numbers and numerals. And under numbers and numerals, we are going to do what we call counting and representing whole numbers. Counting and representing whole numbers. That is going to be our first lesson for Basic 4 class. Now, what we are saying is that at the end of the lesson, we will be able to demonstrate an understanding of some quantities using the place value. Then also, we will also continue to demonstrate and use some manipulative materials like the multibase block, like the Abacus, to represent these numbers. Now, in what we are going to do at Basic 4, we are going to count up to hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. That is what we are going to talk about. That is going to be our lesson. Now, let us move on. But before we even begin how to represent numbers and even using the manipulative materials, we must first find the meaning of what we call number. When you say a number at all, what is the meaning? How do you understand number? We are saying that a number is the mental idea or a fact that we have about some quantity or a quantities. So we can think of a number. Let's say 5. Let's say 4. Let's say 3. What is it at all? That is the number, that is the idea, or that is the mind that you have. That is called the number. So we can clap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is the number, that is the idea that we have. We can tap our foot on the ground 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That is the number. We can count maybe stars, we can count mangoes, we can count oranges, and get 5. So the 5 that we have in our mind is the number. That is the number. Good. So we have it over here. That is the mental idea or fact about and expressing a quantity in the mind of a person. That is the number. So we can have this particular image as somebody thinking about a number, which is 5. He is thinking about that number, which is 5. That 5 could be maybe some oranges in a basket or some apples in a basket or counting maybe 5 stars. The idea that we have at the back of our mind is the number. Good. Now, apart from that, let us move on. Then, what is also a numeral? We have the number 5 at the back of our mind. Then, the numeral becomes the symbol that we use to represent the idea of the 5 that we have at the back of our mind. The numeral is the symbol, the figure that we normally write down. That is the numeral. So we can think of, so that is it. It is the symbol used to represent a number or a name or that stands for a particular number. That is it. So we can have our first 10 numerals. We can have our first 10 numerals. And our first 10 numerals begin from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. These are first 10 numerals. These are numerals or these are symbols that we use to represent the number or the idea of a number that we have at the back of our mind. Then after this, apart from these first 10 numerals, which other numeral can you make mention of? Give me some of the numerals that you can mention of. So we can think of these numbers. We have a number like 48, we have 24, we have 99, we have 700, we have, as I said, we first have the first 10 numerals, which are 1-digit numbers. We can also have 2-digit numbers, 3-digit numbers, 4-digit numbers, and so on and so on. These are called symbols, numerals, which are used to represent the number that we have at the back of our mind. Very good. I believe you are following and you understand what we are doing. Let us move on, learners. Now, in our counting, as I said earlier, we have counting or we have stages of counting. The first one that I displayed on the screen for you is the first numerals, which are called ones. So we have ones. Then, what do you think will be the first or the next stage of counting? If we have ones, then the next one is what? I believe you are saying tens. Good. So we have ones, we have tens as well. Then we have hundreds. Then we have thousands. Then we have tens of thousands. Then we have the last one, which is called hundreds of thousands. At base 4, this is where we will be counting up to. We have ones, we have tens, we have hundreds, we have thousands, we have tens of thousands, and we have hundreds of thousands. Now, for the purpose of our studies, we are going to represent O when we see ones. Whenever we see ones, we are going to represent with O. Then whenever we see tens, we are going to represent it with T. Then hundreds is H, thousands is TH, tens of thousands is TTH, then hundreds of thousands is going to be HTH. Learners, please don't be confused or don't maybe see it to be a different thing whenever you see these initials used in representing the stages of counting. Please, I said that whenever you see ones, we are going to represent it with O. Then tens, we have T. Then hundreds, we have H. Thousands, we have TH. Tens of thousands, we have TTH. Hundreds of thousands, we have HTH. these are the stages of counting that we'll be doing in Basic 4. Now, good. So we have a simple diagram which represents these stages of counting. So we have our O for ones, we have our T, we have our H, we have our TH, we have our TTH, which is tens of thousands, and we have our HTH, which is hundreds of thousands. Let us move on, learners. Now, with this idea, we are going to represent using some manipulative materials to represent these stages of counting that we have gone through. So the first one that we are going to talk about is the abacus. Now, abacus is an ancient manipulative material which is being used in representing numbers. It is used to represent numbers. Now, it has spikes. The lines that we see on the little oval over there are called spikes. Now, each spike also represents a particular stage of counting. Each spike represents a stage of counting. So we have the first spike beginning from the last one. We have our first one, which is for the ones. Then we have our second one, which is for the tens. Then we have our next one, which represents hundreds. We have the next one, which represents the thousands. Then we have the tens of thousands, and you have the hundreds of thousands as well. This is called abacus. This is called abacus. We can use this abacus for a lot of activities when we talk about mathematics. It can be used to add numbers. It can be used to subtract numbers and represent numbers as well. Today, we are going to talk about how we are going to use the abacus to represent numbers from ones up to hundreds of thousands. From ones up to hundreds of thousands. Now, this is how we are going to use it. Now, we are going to be giving some numerals. We are going to be giving some numerals. And for the spike, when you have maybe a digit or a particular numeral on a spike, we are going to put the number of counters on that particular spike. So, for example, when you have a number and maybe the last number ends or the number ends with 5, meaning that 5 is going to be on the ones, meaning we are going to put 5 counters on that particular spike. So let's try an activity and see. Good. So we have these numbers for you. We have these numbers. So we have 352,615. We have 352,615. We are going to use the abacus to represent this number. So, we have our abacus. We have the ones, we have the tens, we have the hundreds, we have the thousands, we have the tens of thousands, and we have the hundreds of thousands as well. Now, let's look at it. Good. I hope you can see what has been displayed on your screen. So, for the ones, we have 5 different counters being put on that particular spike. Then for the tens, we have 1. Because when you look at the number, over there, the last digit is 5, and we are going to put 5 on it. But learners, one thing that you must take note of it is that when you are representing numbers, being abacus or place value chart, you always have to begin from the ones. You have to always begin from the ones, from the last digit. That is what you need to know. So we are beginning our representation of numbers using the abacus from the last digit or from the last stage of counting, which is ones. So we have 5 counters on the ones, which represents the value of that number is 5. Then we have our next one, which one of the counter represents 10. So we have 10 on it. Then we also have 6 on the hundreds, which is 600. Then we have 2 on the thousands, which represent 2,000. Then we have 5 on the tens of thousand. Now, each counter that we put on the tens of thousand, each one represents 10,000. So we have 10,000, we have 20,000, we have 30,000, we have 40,000, and we have 50,000. So we have 5 different counters on the tens of thousand. Then lastly, we have 3 on the hundreds of thousand. We have 3 on the hundreds of thousand. So when we use the abacus to represent this number, this is what we are going to have. We have 5 on the ones, we have 1 on the tens, we have 6 on the hundreds, we have 2 on the thousands, we have 5 on the tens of thousand, and we have 3 on the hundreds of thousand. Now let us move on. Let us move on. So let us take the other number, our next number. So we have 48,037. Now, our next lesson, when we begin using the place value chart, we also learn how to read numbers using the place value chart. But today we are representing numbers using the abacus. Now, we have 48,037. 48,037. So what we are going to have is that we are going to have 7 of our counters being placed on our ones. That is the last spike. We are going to have 7 counters placed on it. Then we are going to have 3 counters being placed on the tens. On the tens here, we are going to have 3 being placed on it. Now let us look at it. For the hundreds, we don't have, it is 0. So we are not going to put any counters on that particular spike, which represents or which is on the hundreds. Then we are going to have 8 counters on the thousands. 8 counters on the thousands. Then 4 also on the hundreds of thousands. That is going to be our representation on this number. Good. So I hope you can see what is being displayed on your screen. We have 7 counters on ones. We have 3 counters on tens. We don't have any counters on the hundreds because that number over there is 0. So we are not going to put any counters over there. Then we have 8 on the thousands, and then we have 3 on the tens of thousand. So it is tens of thousand. We have 3 on that. We have 3 on that. Good. I believe you've gotten or you've understood what we are doing. So we are representing numbers using the place value chart. Good. Using the place value chart, and then we are also going to use, or we are also using the abacus to also represent it. So for today, we are using the abacus to represent numbers. We are going to represent it on that. Good. Now, learners, let us take our books and our pens and just have a small sketch of the abacus and represent these numbers on it nicely for me. And let us see. So the first number that we have is we are having 23,264. 23,264. Try and represent this using the abacus. Try and represent this using the abacus. Now the second number is 17,873. 17,873. And then our last number that we are going to practice using the abacus to represent it is 223,576. 223,576. Let us try and see how we are going to represent these numbers using the abacus. Let us try. So, in this, we are going to draw our abacus nicely. Nicely. It can be, your oval can be in the form of a rectangle or any shape. What we need to do is that we need to see our ones, we need to see our tens, we need to see our ones, so we have it nicely. like this. We have our ones, we have our tens, we have our hundreds, we have our thousands, we also have our tens of thousand, we have our hundreds of thousand. Good. So we have it nicely drawn like this. Then you draw your spike nicely on it, nicely on it, nicely on it. So you do it carefully and nicely. Good. So we have it nicely drawn as this. So, and then you represent your counters on it. You put your counters on it. Now let us begin. Because I said that we always represent numbers from the ones, we are also going to begin from ones. So how many counters are we going to put on the ones? Looking at the number over there. So we have 4. So we are going to put 4 counters on it. That is the first one. We have our second one. We have our third one. And we have our fourth one. Very good. Very good. That is 4 on ones. Let us move on. Looking at our number, how many counters do you think we are going to put on the tens? I believe you are saying 6. Good. So we are going to put 6 on it. So we have the first one, whereby each counter that we put on it is tens. So our first one is 10. Then the next one is 20. Then we have 30. We have 40. We have 50. And we have 60. Very good. So that is how to represent numbers on the abacus. Let us move on to hundreds. So we have 2 and the hundreds. So we are going to put 2 counters on the hundreds. Each counter represents 100. So we are going to have our first 100. Then we are going to have our 200 over there nicely. That is it. Let us move on. We are now moving on to the thousands. That is the 4th stage of counting, as I will call it. So we have the first one represent 1,000. So we have our first one, 1,000. We have our 2,000. Then we have our 3,000 over there. Good. Then the last one, because our number being given to us ends as tens of thousands, that is going to be our last number. So we are going to have 2 also being represented, or 2 counters being put on that particular spike, which represent tens of thousands. So each counter that we put over there is 10,000. So we have 10,000 and then 20,000. Good. So we have 23,264. 23,264. Now I want you also to try and work on the second one. We have 17,873. 17,873. After doing this, we are going to have our work being displayed nicely. So we have the second one being displayed on your screen for you. And I believe what you have done is what is also being displayed over there. We have 3 of the counters being put on the ones. Then we have 7 of the counters being put on the tens, which represent 70. Then we have 8 counters being properly represented on the hundreds, which is 800. 7 also on the 10 or on the thousand, which is 7. 7 on the tens of thousand, which represent 7,000. And then we have only 1 on the tens of thousand. So we have 17,873. 17,873. Good. So our next one is also being displayed over there nicely. We have 223,576 that's been displayed nicely over there for you. Good. So apart from using the abacus, we can also use what we call the multi-base block. We are going to use the multi-base block also to represent numbers. Also, the multi-base block is also a manipulative material or instrument which is being used to also represent numbers. The multi-base block or the dense base block can also be used to add numbers and also subtract numbers as well. Now, let's look at how it looks like. So we have our small, people call it cube or unit. So we have our first unit or cube. Then we have our long, which we also call it like flat. Then we have flat. Then we also have our block. So we have the unit, we have the long, we have the flat, and we have the block. Good. So that is the multi-base block. This is what we are going to use to represent numbers. This is what we are going to use to represent numbers. We have earlier spoken or learned how to use the abacus to represent numbers. Then we're also going to use this multi-base block to represent numbers. So we have our unit, which is also called a cube. We have our long, which sometimes is being called rod. We have our flat, and we have our block. Let us go through again. I said we have what? We have our unit or the cube. We have our long or the rod. Then we have our flat, and we have what we call the block. So for the purpose of our lesson for today, we are going to represent or associate our multi-base block with the stage of counting. So that is what we are going to do for today. Now, we are going to use the unit or the cube to represent hundreds. Please take note. We are going to use the unit to represent hundreds. Then, we are going to use our long to represent thousands. Long will be for thousands. Then the flat will stand for tens of thousands. And then our block will represent hundreds of thousands. So we have our units, we have our long, we have our flats, and then we also have our block. We have the units, the long, the flats, and the block. Unit is for 100, long is for 1,000, flat is for tens of thousands, and the block is going to represent hundreds of thousands. So let us learn how to use this multi-base block to represent numbers. We are going to use it beautifully. Good. So let us look at it. So first we have our number. We have 34,500. Let us try and go through or just review or have a recap of what I said the numbers of the multi-base block are. So we said the cube is going to represent what? The cube is going to represent, or the unit is going to represent 100. Then the long will represent 1,000. And then the flat will represent tens of thousands. And then the block will represent hundreds of thousands. So when you look at it, and you look at this number, how is it going to be? How many of the units or the cubes are we going to have? How many of the longs are we going to have? And how many of the flats are we going to have? Because this number ends at tens of thousands. So learners, let's look at it. Let's look at this. So we have 3 for the tens of thousands. So we have 3 of the flats. We have 4 of the longs. And we have 5 of the units or the cubes. So we have 3 which was representing tens of thousands. We have 4 of the longs which is representing 1,000. And we have 5 of the units or 5 of the cube representing hundreds. So this is how we represent using the multi-base block. So we have 34,500. 34,500 because we are having 3 of the flats, which is tens of thousands. We have 4 of the longs, which is representing 1,000. And we have 5 of the units, which is representing hundreds. Very good. That is how we use the multi-base block to represent numbers. Let us move on. Let us take some examples and be familiar with how to represent numbers using this? Good. So what do you think? What do you think this representation will be? Just remember that we said that the block will be for hundreds of thousands. And we said that the flat is going to be for tens of thousands. The long is going to be for thousands. And the unit is going to be for hundreds. Now we have only one of our block. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 of our flats. We have 3 of our longs. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of our unit. So with this representation, what is going to be our number? Let us write and see. So we have 1 of the block. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of our flats. Then we have 3 of our long, which is 100,000, 50,000, and 3,000. Good. Let us move on. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we have 8 of the unit. And we said that the unit represents hundreds. So we have our 800 over there. So for this representation, we have 153,800. 153,800. And I believe what you had or your answer is the same as what we have all done it here. So we have 153,800. Good. Now, so for your own activity, I want you to just make a sketch of the flats, make a sketch of the long, and then make a sketch, a small thing to represent the unit as well. So we have 25,200. 25,200. And our next number is 51,400. 51,400. Let us all learn how to represent this number using the multi-base block. So as I said earlier, we are seeing that the units or the cubes will represent hundreds. So for our first number, we are going to have 2 of the cubes or 2 of the units. Then we have 5, which represents 1,000 for our longs. And then we are going to have 2 of our flats. So that is going to be our answer. Let us see. And I believe what we have on the screen is the same as what you have gotten. So we have 2 of the flats, which represents 20,000. Then we have 5 of the longs, which represents 5,000. And we have 2 of the unit, which represents 200. So our number is 25,200. 25,200. Now let us move on to the next number. I said that our number is 51,400. 51,400. For that reason, we are going to have 5 of our flats. We are going to have only 1 for the long and then 4 for the units. That is going to be our answer. And let us see whether that is what is being represented as the number. Good. So we have 5 of the flats, whereby one of each flat represents tens of thousands. So we have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, and 50,000. Then when you come to the longs, or when you come to the rod, we have only 1 for it, which represents 1,000. And then we have our 4 units over there. So we have 51,400. 51,400. Learners, I hope you gotten what we are doing, and I hope you understand this perfectly. This is how to use the multi-base block to represent numbers. We earlier learned about how to use the abacus to represent numbers, and now we are learning how to use the multi-base block to represent the numbers. Good. And I hope what you've done is perfect. Thank you very much. and I hope you understand what we did. Now, for the summary, all what we did today, we first understood the meaning of numbers and numerals, and we said that numbers are the fact or the idea that we have about a quantity, expressing it. That is called the number. And I said that we can have a number like 5 at the back of our minds by maybe counting 5 apples or 5 mangoes in a basket. That is the idea. That is the number that we have at the back of our mind. And we said that when we put a symbol over there, when we put the figure 5 in our book or on the board, that figure that we see, that symbol that we see over there is called the numeral, whereby that numeral is representing the idea that we have at the back of our mind as 5 or 4 or any other number. Then we moved on to represent numbers using the abacus and using the multi-base block. Learners, I hope you understood all what we did for our lesson today. So for your practice, I want you to write this in your books and try it at home, wherever you may find yourself. So we are going to use the abacus to represent these numbers. Then also, you make a sketch, nice one, to also with the multi-base block to also represent these numbers. So we have our first number using the abacus is 65,873. 65,873. Then our next number is 72,892. We are going to use the abacus to represent these numbers. And then when we come to the multi-base block, we are going to use these numbers to also represent it. Our first number is 1,230. 1,230, and then we have 3,230 as well. Learners, this is where we will end our lesson and we will continue at that time. See you. Bye-bye.